welcome to this week's, I almost said Spotlight Sunday. It's not, it's Thursday. It's our weekly Q&A call for Thirsty Thursday, not Sunday. So I got my Dos Equis today. I've already had Dos Equis, but it's really freaking hard to come up with different booze names that are also tied to design or whatever I'm talking about that week. So as always, if you have any suggestions of topics you would like me to cover in the future, let me know. And it's a bonus if you can also tell me a booze that goes with it, because that's where I'm struggling. So we're back to Dos Equis. Last time I had Dos Equis, it was logos and lager. This time, I'm doing design and Dos Equis. So I know I talked a little bit about this before, but I'm coming back to it. I'm coming back to design again because, whoa, sorry. I accidentally played the video. I'm coming back to it again because design is one of the things I get the most questions about. Like, no matter how much I talk about, like, design comes last and doing all of your other pre-work first, design is still everyone's favorite thing to talk about because it's just the most fun, honestly. So I'm going to answer some of the most common questions that I get in terms of design, and then if you have any questions, put them in the box, or if you're watching the replay, put them in the box then too, and just put hashtag replay or tag me or whatever you want to do. I will go back and read the comments and answer any questions that you have there though. So I have my list, and I'm going to be checking my notes, so don't think I'm a weirdo. Checking my notes to see what we're talking about, but so what makes good design is the first thing I wanted to talk about. And I'm gonna like pull out my straight up graphic design degree and use some real design terms here for you and tell you what they mean. So the first thing that makes good graphic design is use of space. So whether you're talking about a logo or a template for a social media post or whatever it is, you want to use the space that you have appropriately. And how you do that is you think about the design terms. So the first one I want to talk about is balance. And again, I'm going to tell you what all these mean. Balance is a pretty easy one to understand, but a lot of times I see, especially on social media posts and especially on websites, when people are talking about what it is that they do, they want to like cram everything all together into like these giant blocks of text, or in pictures they want to like cram as much in there as they possibly can, thinking that that's the best use of their space. It's not. So balance is super important in design. So what you want to do instead is kind of space things out, obviously, to make it easier to read, so it's not a big just clump of text. Sorry, my dog's down there. But kind of balance means the same thing in design that it does in every other part of life. Keeping things in check. So you don't want to have like big giant blocks of copy and then, nothing down here. And then like with a social media graphic, you don't want to have like all of this stuff over here in this bottom right corner and then nothing up here. Does that make sense? If you're watching live, tell me if that makes sense. If you have any questions about that in the replay, let me know. But balance is just like keeping in mind, how things lay out in relation to each other, whether it's on screen or even in print too. Like, don't put things too close together. Don't put things too close to the edge. And I'll talk about that more in a second. But balance is super important. So that's one of the things that, like, when you're looking at somebody's stuff and it just doesn't really look right, like you don't really know what's wrong with it, it just doesn't look good, it usually has to do with balance or one of these other graphic design-y terms I'm going to talk about in a second. It's just like it doesn't feel right. And graphic design has a lot to do with like, how does it feel? And that's kind of counterintuitive, but it's super important. So balance is good. Hey, Tanya. So the next thing that's important to have a good design is unity. That's another graphic design term. So what that means is just how everything fits together with like within itself. Like if we're talking about a logo, like if there's different pieces, it's how they fit together. Like if you have a graphic and then text, or if you have, you know, two different types, like two different typefaces, two fonts, how they fit together, or on a larger scale, even like how your designs fit together as a whole. So like on your website, how does your imagery fit in with your typography and your logo and your color choice and stuff like that. And then also across all platforms, like from it, like your consistency between your social media posts, and then you click over to your website, and is it unified and does it feel the same? So unity is something that's also really, really important. And it's another one of those things that it's not like, oh shit, this is terrible, but it feels off if it's not there. Something just doesn't feel right, and it doesn't feel like professional and good unless those pieces are there. So balance and unity, those are the first two designy words. The next one you probably heard a million times before from any designer on the internet. White space is your friend. White space should be your best freaking friend in the world when you're talking about design. So what that means is kind of what I said a minute ago too. Don't cram a whole bunch of shit into one tiny little space. You don't need to do it. White space is your best friend ever. So when you're like writing copy for your website, again, you don't want giant blocks of text because it's ugly, but also because Tanya loves white space. Me too. And side note, I've gotten this question before. White space does not have to be white. It just really means open space. So white space, though, is your best freaking friend in the world. And you want to use it on everything. So, again, what was I saying a second ago? You don't want giant blobs of text on your website because it's ugly, but also because it's not efficient. Like, one of my favorite things about graphic design in general is it's like a balance between form and function, ideally. Like, yes, you want it to look pretty, but that honestly has nothing to do with graphic design. You want it to look pretty, yes, but that's like the icing on the cake. That's the afterthought. You need it to work well and to use the design to get your audience to do what you want to do. So like on a web page, you want the text to be super easy to read, and adding a bunch of white space and making it very clear with, you know, typography and headings and stuff like that, making it very, very clear what to do next and what you want them to do is super, super important. And it looks better. But so that's like in terms of a website, you want tons of white space and use it strategically to get to your point. Like if you look at my homepage is a good example. Don't look at some of the other pages because I'm still updating them. But like, hey Christy, glad you're here. Break it up into different sections. I said that a second ago. But also like I'm getting into like I should do it. Maybe next week we'll talk about websites and like tips specifically for your website. But each web page essentially should have a purpose, and one goal for each web page. You want, like, whatever you want them to do, make sure the design is leading them toward that with lots of white space. So when we're talking about white space with like social media posts and stuff like that, it really comes down to like not cramming a whole bunch of shit into a tiny little spot. Like, make sure you have plenty of space around the edges, the margins, or, you know, HTML, CSS, it's called padding, but margin, padding, white space around the edge. Like, don't put stuff way too close together. Don't make, you know, a huge freaking giant headline that takes up the whole thing. Keep it very clean and simple. And that's the last, you know, designy word. And it's not really even a designy word. We just learned it in design school. Is simplicity. Like, honestly, the number one key to having good graphic design is simplicity. And it kind of pulls in all those pieces that I just talked about. Like, do not try to put a whole bunch of crap in one tiny spot. it doesn't work and it looks bad. So keep everything as simple as freaking possible. And that means like for your logo, you want to have like no more than 2 different fonts. For the love of everything holy, like do not put a cartoon character or any kind of elaborate, goofy little graphic in a logo. Like unless you're like in elementary school or, you know, a daycare or something, don't do that. Obviously, everybody knows, you know, don't use Comic Sans and stuff like that. I think that's pretty universal by now. But keep everything as simple as possible. You don't need some huge, elaborate, fancy pants logo. You need to keep it simple and clear. You want the message that you're trying to send to be clear. Remember that it's that balance between form and function. And if you can't tell what it's supposed to be, if it's too complex and you can't tell what it's supposed to be, then it's pointless, no matter how pretty it looks. So, good design. Balance, unity, white space, simplicity. That's your goal for good design. So, I know there's some people watching live. If you have any questions, let me know. Or if that makes sense, just like give me a heart or type in yes, or tell me if I'm like way off track and you have no idea what I'm talking about. I want to know that too. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is what makes bad design. Yay, hearts. What makes bad design? Pretty much the opposite of everything I said, obviously, but I'll kind of clarify a little bit more. So the number one goal with the design is, or the number one thing you want to avoid is not being legible. Tamara missed the first 8 minutes. That's okay. Yeah, listen to the replay, and then if you have any questions, put them in the box and let me know. But I'm kind of going to recap everything a little bit too. So legibility is super, super important, and that's honestly the number one thing that makes bad design. And I kind of said it a second ago, but whether it's a logo or whether it's, you know, on your website, if you have like competing things or your font is, you know, if it's the color's too bright or too dark or blends in with the background or whatever it is, if you can't read it, you fail. It doesn't matter if it looks pretty. Nothing else matters if you can't read it, or if it like hurts your eyeballs and nobody wants to look at it. Like, legibility is the number one thing to focus on with design. And I know that doesn't sound like super sexy or fun. Like, it's not probably what anybody wants to hear about design, but that should be the number one goal ultimately. And then again, I'm going to come back to white space. I'll say it a million times probably, but do not cram a bunch of crap onto one thing. Space it out. White space is your friend. Nothing too close to edges. Cool. Okay. So that's bad design. So one of the next questions that I get a lot is how to pick colors. How to pick colors for your brand. And that's kind of a fun one. So hopefully everybody that's in here has already taken the archetype quiz. And there's a lot of suggestions for that, for colors and typography and stuff like that in the PDF. But I'm going to talk about it anyway. So colors and fonts, the next thing I have on the list is how to pick fonts. So I'm kind of going to talk about them together a little bit. Essentially, you want to, brilliant, if no one can read it. Yes, it's so true, Tanya. With colors and fonts, your goal is to make it feel right. And I know that's so abstract and hard to capture, and honestly that's why graphic design is is a skill. Not everybody can be a graphic designer just because you have the software. But being able to capture that feel of what you're going for and understanding how typography and colors work. Sorry. Hey. Hi. You're okay, yeah. So, understanding how typography and colors work together to create that feel is super important. So, like, let's say, for example, you're a hero archetype. You want to pick colors that represent strength and determination and all of those qualities that capture the hero. So like, a lot of like dark colors, usually like black and gray, and maybe like a pop of red or blue or something. And keep it really simple is good for the hero archetype. Whereas maybe like the innocent one is more like pastels and sparkles and pretty, like pretty stuff like that. So just kind of understanding that feel first and then picking colors next is going to make it a whole lot easier. And like I said, there's examples of that in the archetype PDFs. And if anybody if anybody wants a different PDF, like you can take the quiz and get yours and you get it. But if anybody wants a different PDF, just let me know. And I can say, like, if you think because you have more than one. I use 3 when I do stuff with my clients. So if you've looked at the other pages and you're primary, but you think you also might be one and you want that PDF too, just let me know, and I'll get it to you. But sorry, my husband is he works night shift and he's asleep, and I think I accidentally woke him up, but he's good. The live video, you never know what you're gonna get. But yeah, so colors it's really about capturing that feel. So it's the same thing then with the typography. So I'll stick with the same examples. Like the hero is gonna be like very simple and clean typography, and maybe like a different, bolder, bigger style for a headline, and then very clean, simple type for the body text. Whereas, the innocent, you might get some of like the fun little scripty fonts or handwritten fonts or something like that that's more personal. So it's about understanding how all of those pieces fit together and getting that overall feel. And I've said this a million times too, so I say the same things over and over again because they're super important. I promise I'm not like crazy and I don't just repeat myself for no reason. But like understanding what you want out of your design before you ever start trying to design it is super, super important. That's why graphic designers don't like a lot of clients. Like, I remember when I first did freelance design. If you don't know my backstory at all, I started out doing just graphic design, and now I've transitioned into, the brand strategy and stuff. But I hated working with clients at first because no one ever knows what they want. And I would get that stuff all the time, like, well, I kind of know what I like, but really I'll know it when I see it. And that is the quickest way to make your designer hate your freaking guts. So it's really, really important to understand, what your goal is, what you're going for, and get that feel. So even if you can't say, I want this font with this color and, make it look like whatever, it doesn't have to be that specific, as long as you can articulate the goal and the feel that you're going for and how you want to relate to your audience. That's what you need to understand before you try to design it. So colors and fonts should be, honestly, they should be easy to pick as long as you know all of that stuff beforehand. But there's just, like I said, there's some basic things. A really cool thing that I always like to recommend people do is look up like the psychology of color stuff, and you can just Google it or go on Pinterest. And I've never written a resource for it because there's no need to reinvent the wheel. It's been done a million times. Like blue is calming, and purple is regal, and it like, just look up the color psychology, because there are some like fundamental basics. You don't want to have like hot pink on a hero brand usually, unless it's and again, there are exceptions to all of these rules too, like depending on how the archetypes fit together, your primary and your other ones. None of these are hard and fast rules. Like, you get to decide, as long as it's legible and as long as it has a white space, you can pretty much make up the rest of the rules. But these just give you a really good starting point. And if you're like, shit, I have no idea what I want, this will give you a really strong starting point to start from there and have something to build on. Because it's always easier to have something to base it on, especially if you're going to go hire a designer. Like, giving them something is better than just saying, I have no idea what I want, because they'll hate you. And then you won't get what you're looking for either. Like, not only will they hate you, but you probably won't get very good results. So colors and fonts. If you have any more questions about colors and fonts, now's the time to put them in. It looks like I have some other stuff, so I'm going to check them. I'm going to check them out real quick. Hi. So the performer archetype, Tamara, that's another one that's just like fun. And again, it depends on what the other two archetypes are also, but usually it's like bright colors. And that doesn't mean like, you know, hot pink and yellow and like a lot of different bright colors, but usually like one bright color as the primary color and then some other, you know, softer tones to kind of back it up. But it's the performer's about like making a statement right off the bat and pulling that energy out. So definitely one or two brighter colors, and then you could that's where you could pick, you know, a fun font, like a fun typeface to do for headings and stuff like that. Maybe like a scripty one, or maybe just like a really unique, different, fun font. And I will say this about fonts too before we move on. All of when I say like a headline font or a heading, those should be used very sparingly. So if you have like a script or a unique font, use it very sparingly. Like, it's because usually they're harder to read, first of all, so you don't want to have anything that's small, like your body text of your website or anything like that. Don't use anything like that. Or even if you have a really long headline, make sure that it's legible first and foremost. So those are all, sorry, beer. The fonts are super, super fun. And I have thousands of fonts installed on my computer and I love playing with them. Just remember legibility. And if you have a font that you just freaking love, but when you put it in there and it's as a headline and it's really hard to read, don't use it. No matter how much you love it, don't use it. Use it for something else. Like if you want to, you know, use it for, you know, your logo or something that isn't super important to read, that's fine, but make sure you can read it with the fun fonts. Okay, now I'm going to read the questions. So I answered the performer. Hi, husband. He went back to sleep now, too. I think he just had to pee. So what questions should we ask ourselves to get an idea of what our goal is? Okay, so that's going to come down to really your ideal client research, which I don't remember if I've done a video specifically on ideal client because I talk about it in like every freaking video. But I do have a resource, like an ideal client workbook and a little tutorial video separately. I can send that to you if you want, but that's really where you figure out what your goals are. Like it's really a combination of your overall mission, vision for your business and what you want to help your clients do and I guess, yeah, like whatever it is, your goal is for how you're going to help your clients should be the same as your goal for your design. So like for me, I want to help my clients use their personality to attract their ideal clients. That's kind of my thing, my overarching mission is just be yourself, use your own personality, don't be fake. So I try to put those aspects into my design too. Like my logo is the scripty font, so it's kind of fun, and I use that very sparingly on my website, and everything is very legible. So when you're asking yourself what your goals are specifically for design, make sure that you're referencing your overall goals for how you want to relate to your audience. So like when you're doing the ideal client research, not only are you learning every single thing about your ideal client, but you also want to think about how do you want your ideal client to perceive you? Like, do you want them to think you're super fun or you're super reliable? And again, all of this stuff comes back to those archetypes too, those fundamental traits of your brand that you like, whatever your goal is, your archetype should help you figure that out a lot. But if you have any more specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. Hopefully that answered what you were looking for. Emotions are a good way to help designers. I want my website to be exciting. Yes. Yeah, Tanya's website is a great example of combining those different archetypes. So you have Tanya, yours yeah, I think you have purple for your main and then some blue also. But it is like having that pop of color is like fun and exciting, but it's also like the language that you use, and your copywriting is more that regular guy gal archetype where it's very relatable and comfortable and nurtured, like you said. So check out Tanya's website, guys, because it's a great example of pulling those different archetypes together and making a whole cohesive feel with your archetypes. So Tamara, magician is my second. Yeah, the magician's a really fun one because you can do so much different stuff with the magician archetype. You can go like the woo-woo-y way and have like where people talk about the crystals and like all of those like emerald greens and purple colors are really popular with the magician archetype. But then you can also go, like the scientisty almost way, like the like really old vintage type stuff is also popular with the magician. So it's very flexible. So that's a really fun one. That's a fun one to have. Hey, Christy. Yes, Tanya, you should be blushing. Your website is awesome. So again, any more questions that you have about anything we've talked about up until this point, put them in. Good design, balance, unity, white space, simplicity. Bad design. You need it to be legible, and white space again. Don't cram a bunch of crap together. Colors and fonts should be based on your feel and your overall goal for what you want your ideal client to think about your brand when they look at it, and what, obviously, your goal, whatever you want to portray. So that's everything we talked about so far. Put in any questions if you have them. Let's see, is there somewhere on Pinterest that we can look up colors for archetypes? I know that there is. I will, as soon as we get off here, I'll hop on Pinterest and find the ones that I used. I have a book back here. I feel like that's a pain in the ass though to like try to show you guys in a book, but there are tons of them on Pinterest. So I'll find one that I like and I'll post the link in here when we get done. They're in the PDFs. Yeah, they're in the PDFs also. There are like different color palettes that go with each archetype. And again, too, if for anybody that came in late, if you have your primary archetype PDF, but you know what your other ones are and you want that, just let me know and I'll send it to you. When I look at performer, it's interesting. Yeah, the performer is one of the most misunderstood ones, I feel like, because I feel like people think it's just about like, oh, it's all fun and games and people don't take it seriously. But the performer can be super serious. It's about like lightening the mood though. So it does usually have like a pop of color, but it's overdone a lot of times and it's like hurts your eyes a lot of times. So it's harder to do it right, but if you can do it right, it's one of the coolest ones. I really like the performer. And Pinterest boards for, yeah. Yes, I do. I have Pinterest boards for each archetype too. And so do a bunch of other people online. Like, obviously I didn't invent archetypes. There are other brand strategists that use them also. Amber, that was in here last Sunday. She also has a quiz, and I think she has some Pinterest boards, and there are a bunch of other people that do them too. So Pinterest is a really, really good resource for colors and typography specifically in relation to each archetype. Joy is what I want to bring, but also truth. Yeah. So that's totally doable. Joy is definitely the performer, like bring out the lighter side and keep it fun, but it's so cool when you can get it right and pull out that deeper meaning behind it, because that's what usually gets lost when people try to do it, is they focus too much on the fun and not enough on the other stuff. So tying all of those archetypes together makes it work so much better. So you got it, Tamara. Okay, so I'm gonna go a little bit techie for a second and talk about specific file types in design and what they're used for, because I get this question all the time. So if you've ever worked with a designer, I'm sure that you've probably heard some of these words and types. But so I'm just going to give like a basic overview, and then as always, if you have specific questions, just type them in the box and I'll answer them. But let's start with a JPEG. So a JPEG is a photo file, essentially. It is, you can save it at whatever size you want, but it's essentially a photo file. And what that means is if you have a JPEG, let's say of your logo, and it's 3 inches by 5 inches or whatever, and you want to make it bigger and blow it up, it's going to look like shit. Because a JPEG is made up of pixels. And if you blow them up, it becomes pixelated. That's what pixelated means. It's like a bunch of little dots that make up a photo file. If you've ever zoomed in really, really close on a picture, you'll see what I'm talking about. So that's a JPEG. So if you're going to use a JPEG in your design, you need to make sure that it's sized appropriately. So like if you need a JPEG of your logo, make sure that you know where it's going. Like if it's going on your website and it's going in the header bar on your website, make sure you check and see what size your template recommends, and make sure you export your JPEG into the correct size, because if you try to blow it up, it's going to look like crap. That's a JPEG. The next one that you see a lot in design, and that I recommend using a lot, is a PNG file, a PNG. And it's essentially the same as a JPEG in that it's made up of pixels, and it also, the same things apply. It needs to be the exact same size that you need it because you can't blow it up. But a PNG file has a transparent background. So like the little logo in the bottom of my screen, see if I can point to it right there. That's a PNG file because there's no background on it. So like with if you have a JPEG of your logo and it has a white background and you try to put it on a colored background and you have this hideous white box around it, you need a PNG file that doesn't have the background in it. So that's the difference between those two. Then we get into like actual design files. So you have, actually I'm gonna back up and I'm gonna talk about the different design software first. So most people use like Canva or something like that to do their design, because most small business owners are not also graphic designers. So you don't have, Photoshop and Illustrator and all that stuff. If you do, that's awesome, but it's not necessary. But just so you guys understand what I'm talking about, I'm going to explain those different softwares and what they do. So there's Adobe Photoshop. I'm sure everybody in the entire world knows what Photoshop is. Photoshop is for editing photos, pictures. So they're called rasterized, and all that means is what I was talking about before. They're made up of small little pixels, and if you blow them up, they look like crap. That's the type of images that Photoshop works with. You can edit colors, and Photoshop is the most amazing thing on the planet. I love Photoshop, but you have to know what it's used for. It's not for creating logos. It's for editing photos. So you can resize them, you can crop them, you can change colors, and you can do all this amazing stuff. It's awesome. So then on the other side, we have Adobe Illustrator, and that's where you make vector graphics. So vector graphics are what you would make a logo in. So a vector graphic can be scaled to any size that you want it. You can blow it up to a freaking billboard if you want it that big. So that just means that they're not made up of a whole bunch of different pixels. They're solid lines, and you can blow it up as big as you want. So that's why logos are made in Illustrator. Now you can export them into different sizes and to put into Photoshop or whatever else you need to use it for. But understanding the difference between those two softwares is how you're going to know what to use when and what to ask your designer for. So let's say you hire a graphic designer to make you a logo. You want to make sure that you always get those vector files. So that could be an Adobe Illustrator file, like it's .ai, or an EPS is what you might also see it called. It's encapsulated postscript, which you don't need to know that, but an EPS file is a vector file. You can make it as big as you want. Always, always, always get those for any kind of logo type design. So I just dumped all that. That was a lot of techie stuff. So if you have any specific questions about what file should I use, when, or anything like that, put it in the comments. Let me know. I realize that was tech heavy, and some of that you don't need to know, but hopefully that'll just help you understand, you know, why things are done a certain way. Yay, hearts. I love hearts. Okay, so what's next on our list here? The best software to use for different types of design. So I just talked about that. Illustrator versus Photoshop. So then we can talk about Canva. So Canva is awesome. That's, if you don't have Photoshop, that's what I always recommend everybody uses, Canva. And if you can, spring for the paid version of Canva because you can save your brand colors and you can make templates that are much easier to work with in Canva. If you have the paid version, but the free version works too. It just takes a little bit more time to get everything set up how you want it, and to use it. It takes a little bit more time, but it still totally works. So just remember kind of what we talked about a second ago. Like if you're making a template for a social media post in Canva and you want your logo on it, you're going to want to put the PNG file in there because it has a transparent background, unless it's already a white background, and then a JPEG wouldn't matter. But hopefully all of your stuff is not just white backgrounds. Hopefully. I have seen people like a bunch of times where they'll just like all of their design is super simple and everything's on white backgrounds just because they can't cut out their logo and they only have a JPEG version. So make sure that's why it's really important to get the right file types that you need when you're working with a designer, so that you can design things how you want and not have to just use plain white backgrounds because that's the only thing that looks good with your logo. Okay, so proud I knew most of that. Yay! I'm glad you did too, Tanya. Yeah, you can't download in Canva, but you can upload your PNG file to Canva. And then if you want to have a different background, you found my Pinterest. Yay! I love Pinterest. Pinterest is the best thing ever. But yeah, Tanya, you can upload your PNG file and put it on whatever you want and then export it. So I guess maybe like tell me what you're trying to do specifically in Canva and why you want to export it as with a transparent background. And then maybe I can help you a little bit more. But hopefully you can just upload your logo into Canva and design it however you want and then export it back out as a complete graphic, and you wouldn't need it to be transparent. But if you're trying to do something else, let me know. I can try to help you. Okay, so next up is whether you should hire a designer or try to DIY. That's a fun question. So if you are going to DIY, I always like people to try to do that first anyway, honestly. And I know that's probably weird to say coming from a designer, but I think at least trying to do it yourself first will help you figure out what you want and what you don't want a little bit faster than going back and forth with a designer. So at least try to do it. There's no harm in trying, unless you're just like, F this, I got way too much money and not enough time. Perfect world situation, then go for it. But I always like to have people at least try it first. It'll give your designer that starting point. But if you are to the point where you've tried and you're like, F this, I can't do it, you want to hire a designer, then some of the questions you should ask and how to pick a designer is going to be the next really important step. Sorry, I don't know what the heck my dog is doing. She's like this giant pit bull. I don't know if she'll walk back if you can see her. She's humongous, but she thinks she's little tiny and tries to cram into tiny spots and knocks everything over. So she's fun. Anyway, I wrote an article on my blog a long time ago. I can post the link in here that goes like really deep into like the different types of designers that you can hire and what the different types are good for and how much you should pay and all of that stuff. So I'll just summarize it and then I'll put the link if you want to like read it in more detail. Essentially, the first thing you want to do is figure out what type of designer you need. Like make your list of what you're looking for. before you even start looking. So do you just need maybe you just need a logo, and then you're comfortable enough in Canva to make the rest of your stuff and make it match and make it look good. Or maybe you're like, F that, and you want your entire design package done. Like, you want your logo, and you want social media graphics, and you want cover images for your stuff and business cards, or just make out your list beforehand, because that's going to help you know who to pick. So there are tons and tons and tons of different designers out there and different types of designers out there. And you can pay literally anything. Like, you can go on Fiverr and pay $5 for a logo. You might get lucky and it might be really good, or it might be total shit. It's kind of look at the draw over there. Or you can pay thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for a logo. It really just depends on what you need. So if you only need a logo, like if you don't need any of the other stuff, if you only need a logo, I would look for like a freelance designer, like somebody that just does design. They just call themselves a graphic designer. That would be the way to go. And again, keep in mind, when I'm talking about whether or not you should hire a designer, this is with the understanding that you already know all of the answers to all of the strategy stuff. You know your ideal client like the back of your freaking hand. Like, you have your target audience narrowed down. You're very specific about what your offer is and how you're going to present it. All of that stuff, all of the other branding things that I talk about in here all the time, your messaging, all of that stuff. You need to know that before you hire a designer, because just a graphic designer is not going to be able to help you with any of that. A graphic designer is like it's the difference between a service provider versus an expert. Like, an expert is somebody who you can go to and say, I'm trying to do this, and they'll help you figure it out. Just a straight up graphic designer doesn't do that. They're going to expect you to tell them what you want and what you need. And then they're just the hands that execute. So if you're going to go that route, be very, very clear and very specific about what you need. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean they're not good. Like, that's what I used to do all the time. They have their purpose and they're good at what they do, but they only do their thing. And you have to take on a lot of the responsibility of understanding all of those aspects of your brand before you go hire them. Okay, let me read down here real quick, because that person, my background is white. Tanya. So Tanya, I feel like you told me you made your logo yourself. So what did you make it in that you couldn't export it, that you couldn't have it on a transparent background? That would be interesting to know. Sorry, my phone's going off over here. Okay. I have way too much money. Yeah. Yeah, it does. Trying to DIY, it just helps you get more clear on what it is you're looking for and what it is you hate. Because you might not know until you try stuff. And just trying stuff like that is going to cost you money with a designer. They're not going to try stuff for you for free, unfortunately. So that's why I always recommend trying it first. Swift Publisher 4. I'm going to be honest, I don't even know what that is. So, I know that even in like Word and Pages and stuff like that, if it's just a simple typographic logo, like it's just text, you can save stuff as a PDF, and they have transparent backgrounds. A PDF usually does, depending on how your settings. So maybe try that, and then convert that PDF into something else. There's lots of stuff online where you can just Google like PDF file converter and change it into something else. Or that's something that is really good for Fiverr and the Upwork and the cheaper ones like that. If it's just something really simple like that, like, hey, I have this, I need you to recreate it, in this format and send it back to me. That's a really good use of those different platforms. Instead of paying, a $75 an hour graphic designer to do stuff like that, to do simple stuff like that. So that's what I would suggest, Tanya. It's $1,000 cheaper than Photoshop. Yeah, Photoshop's not cheap at all, but I can't function without it. It's my favorite thing ever. Yeah, transparent PDFs. Yep. Check it out. Okay. So, those are basically the different types of designers then. So you have, like the super, super low end Fiverr type stuff. Honestly, most of those aren't real designers. And that's probably totally snobby of me to say. Like, I did go to design school, so I get to be a snob about it. But those are usually the people who just bought the software and learned how to work the software and don't have a strong grasp on those basic design principles that I talked about at the beginning. So that's why a lot of times you don't have a lot of luck with them. And then also they don't usually have a ton of experience working with clients. It might be that maybe they are good at design, but maybe they just like are doing it just to make money and they don't really have those interpersonal client to designer skills. They don't know the right questions to ask to get the information that they need, and you end up going back and forth with a million different revisions and it's not right. So if you go that route, make sure you're very, very, very specific on what you want. So then the next level would be like a freelance designer, like somebody who just does it on the side or they're just starting their business. That's going to be like the middle ground pricing. You can find them anywhere from like $30 to $100 an hour. When I did it, I charged $75 an hour. They usually are much better at what they do. They're a little bit more expensive, but if you do need a little bit more help, that's the way to go. And then there's like an agency, like a full-on agency that does stuff. And that's where it's going to be really expensive, but they're going to help you a lot more with the process and figuring that stuff out. So like I said, you can pay literally any amount of money you want. And you get what you pay for. That's what it comes down to. Honestly, you get what you pay for. So if there's like, I'll share the article when we get off of here just so you can see. There's like, I made a little, what's it called, a Venn diagram where you have the circles and stuff overlaps, and it's essentially like quality, price, and speed, and you can only pick two. And that's true. And for design, just like it is with pretty much everything else, you can get it fast and cheap, but it's going to be yeah. So you can only pick two of those. You get what you pay for. That's what it comes to with design. And again, that's why I recommend at least try it first. You're going to have much better results. So if you've decided the type of designer that you want and you do want to hire it out and you've already tried and you've said, F it, I suck at this, and you want to hire it out, the type of questions that you should ask then and what to look for when you go to hire a designer are important. So you want to look at the type of stuff that they usually work on, first of all. If you can find a specific niche designer, that's best. Like, I know there's a lot of graphic designers. It's like, I'm a graphic designer for the health and fitness industry, or I'm a designer for doctor's offices, or whatever it is. You're going to have much better results if you can find one that does that stuff all the time, because they are going to know the right questions to ask. So figure out what they usually do, and if it aligns with what your goal is and what you're trying to do, because it's going to be much harder if not. Geez, I like scratched my neck. It's all red. Nice. So yeah, so that's the first question. If they have a portfolio, look at it. A portfolio isn't always the best indicator, honestly, though, because it's just like, I feel like it's like a resume almost. Like, you just put the pretty stuff out there and not necessarily like the stuff that people need to see. So I don't even share a portfolio anymore. I have like a couple where I'll like call it out in testimonials and stuff and be like, ooh, I made this one. I have one of those on my site, but I don't usually share that unless people specifically ask for it, just because I feel like that's not the most important thing. So the next thing, and I feel like I know I've talked about a little bit of this stuff before, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. I think the logos and logger, if you go over in the events tab and look at the past events, I talked about hiring a designer a lot in that one. But, the next most important question I would say is the price, not necessarily just how much is it, but what all is included in the price. And we talked earlier about like making a list of the specific things that you need, and try to find a designer that includes all of those things. If it's, you know, your logo and your social media package and all of that stuff together, try to find one that does the most for the most amount of money. You know, common sense. But that's my list. That I've gone through my whole list now of design stuff. This was a long one today. I've been on here forever. So if anybody has any specific questions about design or anything else, let me know and I will answer them. If you watch the replay, if you're watching the replay, same thing. Always put in your questions. I always go back and look at them. So why we should be brand besties. Amber, yes. Brand besties. We should hashtag that. Alliteration, yes. If there's enough work in it, you can get the general idea of their ability stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Then especially like if you're hiring, and I didn't really talk about this. I think that's what I'll do next week is talk about website stuff, specifically web designers, and website stuff next, like the purpose of your website. But if you are hiring a designer and they say that they're a web designer and they say that they're, you know, a really good graphic designer, not only their portfolio, but look at their own stuff. Like, I can't tell you how many times I go to people's websites and they're like, I'm a WordPress designer and I'm so good at this and look at all my stuff in my portfolio, but their own website looks like shit. Like, look at that too, not just what they can do for others, because it's important what they can do for their clients, obviously, but having their own shit together kind of tells you a lot about them that hopefully it's good, but I see it all the time where it's not good. So check their own stuff. I look for variety. Yeah. So especially if you go for like just not a specialized niche designer, like just a freelance graphic designer, that's where you would really want to look at the variety of different things that they do, and specifically if they can do what you're looking for. And again, that's where those archetypes come in too. Like if you're a hero archetype, but most everything in their portfolio is like frilly, sparkly, you know, girly stuff, it's probably not a good fit. So again, just really understanding what you need and what you want before you get in there and start talking to people is really important. Thank you, Tamara. So yeah, that is my design stuff, and I wanted to talk about it today because I have openings in my Brand Boldly program. So that is my 4-month coaching program, but I just changed it up and I'm super effing excited about it. So I have 3 spots open right now, but the way that I just changed it is I added back in all of the design stuff, and I'm super freaking excited about it. So how it's set up now is you have the 4 months of coaching and strategy and pretty much everything I talk about in here all the time. If you want to, you know, check out the page if you want to know more about the coaching part of it. But I've added in every single part of your design too. So if you work with me one-on-one for 4 months, you get your entire brand strategy and also your logo, your complete website done by me 100%. You don't have to touch it. and all the copywriting, all of the words on all of the pages done by me, and all of your graphic design also. So templates for everything that are completely on brand, from like a Pinterest pin to a Facebook cover photo, literally whatever you need is all included in there now. It didn't used to be, but now it is, and I'm super effing excited about it. So if you need help with that stuff, check out the program. And send me a message. Send me a message on Messenger if you think you might be a good fit for it. If not, that's cool too. I'm always here if you need me. I also have smaller, like an intensive, a 2-hour intensive is a really good place to start. Like if you're thinking about, you know, getting help with your branding, but you're not really sure what you need or where you are with your brand right now, the intensive is a really, really good place to start. It's a 2-hour session and we dig really, really deep in there. I'll put the link in the comments, but it's also always in the sidebar in the description of the group too. So if you have any questions about any of that, if you think you might be interested, just send me a message and let's talk about it. And I'm so happy that you guys came and watched my design stuff, and again, leave any questions in the box if you have any questions. So yeah, super effing excited. Yes, I'm super effing excited. It's going to be awesome. So yeah, I will see you guys on Sunday, and I can't wait to read all your questions and answer all your stuff. Bye. Have a good night. If I can figure out how to exit out of this. I look like a giant dork just waving my arms around. Okay, got it. Bye, guys.